Hi guys, here's your Chapter 4 video. Chapter 4, we're talking about business buying behavior, and we'll kind of compare and contrast that to the consumer buying behavior that we discussed in Chapter 3. So some of the main differences that we see between the business and consumer customers, when we're selling to businesses, the number sold will be dramatically different. So we have generally fewer customers in numbers, but they're much bigger customers. So we have more. I'm going to switch colors because that's not going to show up. More products and generally more sales dollars. So you might make fewer sales a year, but the total volume in terms of products and dollars will be generally bigger. The other thing is the complexity. As we see as we go through this process, making a sale in a business-to-business market is going to be much more complex. It'll take longer. It'll be more involved. It'll have more people involved with it. So it's more complicated, more lengthy. And the other one is more personal selling. They rely less on advertising and that type of thing, and more on personal selling and individual, and the relationships and the personal contact is very important in the business-to-business markets. The demand for business-to-business products, we talk about a couple different things here. Derived demand is demand that is derived from another product's demand, I should say. So, for instance, if the demand for computers goes up, the demand for processors in the computer will also go up. And the same thing with going down. So if you're making something that is part of another product, then obviously the demand for your product will depend on what's happening with the other product. Fluctuating demand, small changes can have a big effect throughout the supply chain. So seasonal things, things like that. And again, changes in demand for the main product will filter all the way through the whole supply chain and all the things that go into it. So we'll just say, let's say, small changes equal big impact. And the other one you see here is joint demand, and so these would be like two products that go together. If there's an increase in the demand for, let's say, the demand for donuts goes up, the demand for coffee would probably also go up. And again, it can go down as well. So sometimes it's not just what's going on with your own product, but what's going on with related products. And you will see companies try to influence their business-to-business sales by influencing customers. And I think the best example of that is, look how many commercials you see for like Intel or something, and consumers don't, they advertise on TV and consumers don't buy Intel. They just are trying to kind of push it through the process that way, so that when you get a computer, you want one with Intel, or you're asking for one with Intel, so they're advertising to the end user, even though the end user would never actually buy that. So that's pretty common within the business-to-business markets too, at least with some. So buyers too. Here we've got the buyer in business-to-business market. We can have nonprofit or for-profit, and we put them into a couple different categories here. Producers, they purchase, say, raw materials and transform them into another product. So it could be a manufacturer, buying things and then turning them into a product that they sell. It could even be like restaurants buying food and turning it into a meal. And that contrasts to resellers who buy something that somebody else made, but then sell it without really changing it. Sometimes there's some packaging changes or something, but for the most part, it's not significantly different. These would be your for-profit, and then institutions and governments would be your non-profit. So institutions might be like schools, hospitals, maybe, hospitals, sorry, that kind of thing, institutional ones. Again, these, the same things, even if I'm a non-profit thing, or I'm a, maybe it's even like, United Way, or something like that's a nonprofit, they still are trying to get the best deals and save the most money. And for these guys, sometimes holding costs down is even more important, because they don't have revenue. It's even harder for them to raise revenue. They can't just raise their price, because they're asking essentially for donations, or for the government it would be taxes. And so holding down costs sometimes becomes even more important for them. And again, they're not trying to maximize profit, but they're still trying to maximize the good that they can do, or the number of people that they can help, or services they can offer, whether it's a school and students, or something like that. So so a lot of the same things that we're talking about still apply to them. It's just for a different motivation there. Purchasing decisions, again, as we said in the first slide, they're much more complex. First of all, it's sometimes it's hard to figure out who makes the decision to buy. It's not always clear. It's not always as obvious as it is with a business to business. Finding who the actual decision maker is really important, and it's not always obvious. I had a speaker come into one of my classes who was talking about personal selling, and that was a lot of what she talked about. It's just trying to figure out actually who the decision maker is, and get in there. And there's probably going to be a number of people involved. Whereas with the business to consumer, it's just one person, right, that you have to sell. Well, maybe like a husband and wife, but for the most part, it's one person. So let's talk about, sometimes we have a whole buying center here, where it's a group of people, and they'll have different titles, like the purchasing agent and the procurement officers, and different places will call it different things. But sometimes I have a whole group of people. Even where I work, if I want to purchase something that's over a certain amount, it has to go through all these people's approval before it actually gets done. I don't have the authority to do that, and depending on the amount would vary, would determine how many people it has to go through to do that. And there are professional buyers who do that. Retail stores have that. They have buyers who that's their job, is to go out there. Like I had a friend who was a buyer for a clothing shop, and so it was her job to go out and go to New York and see the new clothes and decide what the store is going to carry and what they're not. And so that's a buyer. But in addition to just the main buyer, and the book does have a section on there what kinds of things they do. In addition to just the buyer, there's these other people in this buying center, other people influence. So the initiator is someone who first sees the need for the product. So it might be me. I see a need for new technology in the classroom or something like that, and so I'm trying to get this through. The user, for example, if I'm using this technology, these might not be the buyer. These might not actually have any say in it. It could be textbooks. You're the ones that are using the textbooks or the technology, but you don't really have any say in the purchasing thing. So they might not be a buyer or any kind of decision maker like that. But they are going to be the ones that are going to be using it. And depending on where you work, you probably see this a lot too. You're the one using the computer, but you didn't really have any say into what computer it was, for example. Influencers are other people that might not be using the product, but have decisions. So, for instance, that might be my IT department. They're not going to be the ones using the technology that I'm talking about, but they have a lot of experience, and they know a lot about that industry, and so they might be that. The gatekeepers are the people who decide. So let's say it's the sale. So this is the person that determines if the salesperson actually gets to the decision makers or the deciders. So we'll just say they are between the seller and the decider. So it can be the secretary. So here's a good example. If you've ever been in the doctor's office, I swear every time I'm at the doctor's office, you see the pharmaceutical sales rep. And so they want to get to the doctor because the doctor's the decision maker. But the front desk people are really the gatekeepers, right? And they're the ones that determine if that person gets any time with the doctor or not. So the decider then obviously is the one who actually makes the decision. But all these other people are involved with the process in the meantime. Okay, so the dynamics of the business-to-business market, it can vary a lot. Most of the time, business-to-business purchasers, the buyers here, are much more logical. Again, we're talking about big money here, and so they are generally, you tend to think of them as much more systematic and logical. However, there are a lot of, they're still dealing with people, and now we've got even more people. Sometimes for these people, these decisions, there's a lot riding on it. If we're talking about huge amounts, sometimes there's political things going on between the different people within the buying center that we talked about. So the marketers are aware of those and try to work that. But business to business marketing is very strategic. They gather a lot of information, or at least they should. Successful ones will know a lot about that company, what they're already buying, what they're doing, what they're selling, who their customers are. Gather really an enormous amount of information about these companies before they get there. At least the best ones do. This one shows you the stages in the buying process. We went through the stages in the buying process for the consumers, and you can see some of this is the same, but it's a little more detailed. Need recognition. Then we have to kind of quantify that. We have to, kind of write specifications for it. Then we search for potential suppliers. Then we ask them for, this is a request for proposal. So this is when you're getting bids. Okay, you identify people who are companies who are capable of making. And then you ask for bids for it. Then you evaluate the different proposals and bids you got, and then you make a decision. And then for some things, if it's a routine thing, we set up a timeline and then we evaluate it. And if it didn't meet our needs, as described up here in this one, then we kind of search over again. Now this would be for the more complicated process. We go through all these steps for, say, here we'll talk about the different types of purchase. So if it's something just like a straight rebuy, I'm just reordering same product, probably the same quantities, same vendor or supplier, then that's a straight rebuy, and I'm probably not going to go through all these steps then, right? I'm reordering paper for the copier, okay? I'm not going to go through all these steps and get bids and all that kind of stuff. A modified rebuy, I'm changing something. It's the same product or the same type of product, but maybe I'm changing brands or a new brand or a new vendor or something like that. So I still need paper for the copier, but now I'm going to look at, can I get a better deal somewhere else, or can I get with lower quality paper or something like that. So it's a regular order, but now I'm changing some part of it. A new buy is something where, so for the modified rebuy, I might start out here. Maybe I'm going to look at new things. I'm not going to spec it all out again, but I'm going to maybe start looking for new vendors. But a new buy is something, it's completely new product, and for these you would go through all the steps that we described in the other one. So it's a specialized piece of equipment for my manufacturing floor or something. So I'm going to have very detailed specifications. It's going to be probably kind of a long drawn out process there. So not all those stages are going to be used for all of those, for all products and all purchases. The last thing I want, I guess there's two more. Business to business e-commerce. So online purchasing and online marketing stuff. It's really changed business to business in a couple different ways. One is it's less important to be located near the buyers. It used to be these things were centralized, like the garment district in New York, or all the furniture coming out of the Carolinas, and they all became very centralized, and it made it easier for the buyers if everything was together. But that's really not as important anymore. It has been slower to take hold than e-commerce has in business to consumer markets. And a lot of that has to do with, remember at the beginning I said one of the things was that it really relies on personal selling. And so that still holds true. And so it's not quite as, it can be really dangerous, especially for those straight rebuys. So a lot of times people keep rebuying from the same one just because the rep comes in and takes care of it for you, and it's just easier that way. E-commerce makes it much easier for businesses to shop around and find the best price. So there's kind of less loyalty with that, which is why they still really stress this personal selling. There's different types of business-to-business websites, and they kind of describe these sell-side websites, buy-side websites, sell-side being a single seller selling to many different buyers. A buy side, we have lots of different multiple sellers going there to do what they want. Business to business exchanges, and they have examples of these in the book. Auctions, reverse auctions, that kind of stuff. So they kind of examples of those in the books, but there are a lot of different types. Not all of them do the same things. And the last section in this one is business to business. Ethics. Sorry. So with the ethics here, it's not always clear, right? And there's a difference between being legal and ethical. There's some things that are not illegal, but are also definitely not ethical. And it's black, and we all have different opinions. So what one person considers unethical, somebody else might not consider unethical. So it's hard to. That's why it's not always clear, and why people have different opinions on these. So there are laws and regulations to try to keep people honest. The FTC regulates companies to try to prevent unfair trade practices that can harm. So basically, things that would deceive the consumer, or things that inhibit competition, because generally competition is good for the consumer. It gives them more choices and lower prices. So that's kind of what the FTC does. Again, the rules can't cover everything, so sometimes ethical issues have to come in where the law leaves some holes in there. Companies that sell to the government have even stricter rules that they have to follow. So if you are like a contractor that deals with the government, it's even more complicated, I think, or more hoops you have to go through and more rules you have to follow. Most companies will have codes of ethics, and hopefully it's not one of those things that you come up with a code of ethics and put it in an employee handbook somewhere and then ignore it. So if they really enforce these, and you've seen, especially industries that have gotten hit hard, like banking, really has a increased emphasis on ethics and that type of thing. So these apply to business as well. Especially in the business, if you talk about, there's a lot of taking them out to lunch or taking them golfing to make the sale. And so it does get unclear there. So, are you buying from this person because that's really the best deal? Are you buying from this person because they do favors for you? And so you're doing what's best for you as a buyer, not what's best for the company that you work for, which is not really ethical, right? I'll just buy from this guy because, he is giving me a trip to somewhere or giving me a fancy dinner, when that's really not, the product he's selling is really not what's best for the company. So that's where this really gets unclear and wishy-washy. So there you go. That is Chapter 4. And I'll get working on Chapter 5. Sorry about that.